you positive heads out there. Brandon Beachum here, and welcome to the second ever Positive Head podcast. Tonight, I am going to share with you some personal stories, positive paranormal stories, stories of synchronicity, or as I like to call them, real magic, that I've experienced in my own life. So it should be an interesting podcast, to say the least. As you may know if you listen to my first podcast, or you should know if you listen to my first podcast, it's a big interest of mine, this particular subject matter, and it's something that I intend to incorporate into my weekly podcast and interviews. You know, if the person that I'm talking to, that I'm interviewing, has a story of synchronicity, positive paranormal story, I am definitely going to be trying to hear it. So it's exciting. I figured the best thing for me to do, of course, is to share my own personal stories. And I'm not going to share them all. I have, quite a few, maybe a handful, 6 or so that are notable. I'm going to just pick a few today to share with you on this podcast. Also, on this episode, I want to introduce you all to my co-host, Dalien, or Danny Villalobos is his official name. Or actually, no, let's get the official name.
The official name?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. What is the official name?
Well, what does it say on your birth certificate?
Oh, okay. It says Daniel Marcelo Villalobos Barrios. That is the full official name. Yeah.
AKA Danny Villalobos, AKA Dalien.
Right. AKA a few other things,
but we don't have enough time for all the AKAs he's had over the years. We've been longtime friends, Dalien and I. We were in a band together for many years, Kundalini, and we moved actually from Nashville, Tennessee, where we met in, 97, Danny?
Actually, I think we met in 96. We were just doing the math shortly before after I came back out here to California, only 3 months ago yesterday.
Okay. So, yeah, it's been a minute. Almost 20 years. Wow. That's insane. So, yeah, me and Danny have shared many a night discussing interesting topics. And I thought when I had the idea to launch this podcast, what better person to have as my sidekick, as my Robin Quivers, or my Batman's Robin, depending on which road you want to go down there. And so I want to introduce everyone. I'm happy to have you on board. It's going to be an exciting journey to take with Dalien here.
Thanks. Well, I have to make a slight correction to the story. I think I gave you the idea because I think I remember the night that we were talking about all this, sort of the night that possibly the Positive Head podcast was born. And we were sitting outside. I think that basically, if this is my recollection, but I floated to you the idea of being in your podcast as a very sort of casual, wild thing. Like I was just like, I would love to be in a podcast someday with you. I think that would be very fun. And you were like, oh shit, that's a great idea. I think that's basically what happened is I suggested it and you were like, oh, that sounds awesome.
My recollection is I already intended to do the podcast. Had not recorded any podcast yet. So it was, I had the idea to do a podcast, and then you chimed in with the idea to be my co-host, in which case I was like, oh, that is a brilliant idea.
Right, yeah, okay. That's more or less what,
Okay.
Exactly. I'm not claiming...
Are you trying to take credit for my podcast?
I'm not claiming credit for the idea for the Positive Head podcast.
Oh, good, because I was going to have to kill you on air, and that would be very gruesome sounding.
Well, you can always edit that out later, right? Isn't that what they always say?
Well, that would be problematic since you do the editing. So
right, exactly.
Okay, so this evening I am going to share some of my own personal stories with you guys. And, some of you guys are probably going to be very intrigued by the stories. Others of you may be suspect by the stories. They're all true stories from my perspective, and take them for what they're worth. I don't expect everyone that I interview to have a story of synchronicity, or positive paranormal story, or as I call it, real magic, that's happened to them. But once again, that topic is fascinating to me. So it's something that I want to kind of put out there as an intention to make a part of this podcast. And as a result, I think I will attract, people to interview who have something like that to share that is exciting because, one of my motives for having this positive paranormal element in the podcast or making it, something that I discuss with as many people as possible is I want to open people up to the idea that there is more going on, that there's experiences that you can have where, spirit wants to play, the universe wants to interact, source, God, whatever you want to call it. It's there waiting to interact with you at least according to my experience. And it's been really magical and fascinating when those sorts of experiences have come into my life at just the perfect time, getting just the perfect message in a way that is like, especially when it hits you over the head, as some of the stories that I'm going to kind of share with you, you take them for what you think. For some of you, like I said, it will probably be really inspiring and encouraging. For others of you, you'll probably have somewhat of a skeptical eye. And hey, I respect that too. So without further ado, I think I will start with, like I said, I probably have, half a dozen or so really good stories over the last, 20 years or so that I've been on this personal spiritual journey and kind of started opening myself up to even the idea of having these sorts of experiences. And I think that's a key component and why I've had the experiences, just because I've turned my attention to it, as Dalien, you've heard me say many times, where attention goes, energy flows. Mm-hmm. And it's proven to be true time and time again for me. I mean, whenever I turn my attention to, this subject matter and think about it and read about other people's, unique, cool experiences, it's, I think that's what's kind of opened the gateway to me having some of those experiences myself. And what's fascinating about a lot of them is the timing and the method of delivery. And of course, having your perception open enough to expect or, believe that something like that is even possible at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Because at first I thought that, I don't want to say that it was just like idle curiosity on your part, but of course I know that you're very interested in these stories, and I am too. But now I see, because of the way you just said it, I see like a real benefit to sharing these with people, because it's really, and of course I'm thinking also of some of these stories that I've heard, stories that I know from your life, but some of the stories that you've heard from people that you've met in the festival scene, right? And some of these stories are really crazy. I mean, I've heard a couple of them in the last couple of months since coming back out here. Mm-hmm. And now I can definitely tell that some of these stories are just so out there, but so awesome in every way that I can see how they would help open someone up.
Yeah, so. It definitely does. And Danny's referencing, the transformational festival scene, which is definitely a growing scene here on the West Coast, especially. We live in California, and it's a collection of, a group of people coming together, a community essentially for, 4 days at a time, 3, 4, up to a week at a time. And when you have that many people in one place, and it's anywhere from, 1,000 people to 60,000 people, if you take the biggest one I know of, and some of you may be familiar with, probably a lot of my listeners are familiar with Burning Man Festival. When you have that many people in one place, with an expanded perspective, heightened consciousness, aware of the ultimate nature of reality, aware and tapping into the realization and remembrance that they are literally one with, the universe and God, source, whatever you want to call it. And you bring that many people together who are coming online, so to speak, and realizing this truth, it really raises the vibration. So it's almost like stepping into an alternate reality of sorts for a limited period of time. And yeah, I definitely have a few stories at those sorts of events. And I have some of the stories that I'm going to share this evening are from, we're not at many years before I ever even attended something like that. Or actually, yeah, one of them that I'm going to share is before I ever attended any kind of festival, and one is going back to like 2006, which first time I went to Burning Man Festival was 2005, so about that time. But yeah, so one of the very first experiences I'd like to share is back in this is probably 1996, somewhere around there, when I was first opening up to a lot of these ideas and concepts regarding the ultimate nature of reality and who and what my place is in it, and feeling very empowered by the concept of being one with the cosmos, one with the universe, an extension of the universe, and God as well, and feeling the power that comes with that, knowing that we're all, the creator and created rolled into one. So I was reading all kinds of material and just really in a heightened vibrational state. And I remember one of the first books that I ever read, and I don't remember who it was by, but it was a guy who was talking about this sort of experience. He actually, in the book, he was kind of giving an account of his experience waking up and remembering who and what he is, in this physical dimension. And as a result, he started playing with, the rules. And I think that's one of the things that you start realizing. You hear a lot about law of attraction. Well, why does law of attraction work? What you think about, what you give energy to, where you put your focus, you see more of. Because we are creators. Every thought is like a boomerang that goes out, attracts like energy, and brings that back, as a mirror in your reality. Reality is a mirror. If you start paying attention to the interactions you have with other people, start really paying attention, what you're going to see is a mirror of yourself being reflected back to you, something you need to work on, something, positive that you are emanating. And so you start viewing other people instead of judging and looking at them for what's wrong with them and how you're right. For me, and this has really kicked into high gear in the last few months of my life, where when someone's doing something that I view as negative or unfair or not cool, I start looking at it saying, what am I supposed to learn from this? And how is this a reflection of me? And it's been a really profound shift in perspective to start doing that. So anyway, this guy started, playing with the idea of his ability to cause reality to shift based off his perspective and his intention. So he started doing, meditation and different, and it's been many years since I read this book. This is going back, 18 years or so. So I don't recount the exact details, but essentially he shared a story in the book about having, sitting and trying to communicate with animals telepathically. And as a result, having a reaction, the animal actually came to him in some way that was somewhat profound, and he was really shocked by what he felt like he was able to create or manifest. So me being at the state I was in and very curious and open and interested and feeling empowered, thought, okay, if all this is real and I'm one with the cosmos and the universe, I should be able to do the same thing that he did, right? If psychic phenomenon is real, if we're all connected, I'm connected to everything that I see. It's all an extension of self, right? So I'm in my room. This is in Nashville. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee at the time. I was finishing college around this time. And I lived in a 6-bedroom house with 6 guys, and a big house, obviously. And I had the master bedroom. So it was a very big room because, you're in a 6-bedroom house. In the far corner, and I'm a guess it's probably, the far corner from where I was sitting was probably 20 feet away. And I see a moth buzzing in the top corner, 20 feet away from me in this very large room. And I think to myself, I want to test and see if there's some validity to what this guy's talking about in this book, and see if I can call this moth to come land on me, come land in my hands. And so I hold out my hands, both cupped together. I look at the moth 20 feet away. I think, come land in my hands. And no joke, straight away flew completely across the room, landed dead in the middle of my hands. Like no hesitation, no anything. For me, my jaw, of course, hung wide open. And it was a very surreal moment, to say the least. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do you ever remember me telling you that story at the time?
I think so. Yeah. Now it's ringing some bells. I wonder what this book was that you're referencing as well.
I don't recall. It's been so long ago.
I was trying to remember because, of course, we've read a lot of the same books. I think I heard you say recently that the Celestine Prophecy was a book that sort of help initiate
that was
this
one
whole...
of the very initial books, which actually that book's fiction. That was one of the first books, though, that I read that made me very intrigued by the concepts that they discuss in that book. I think are based off real principles with a story. And it was, very well written and very intriguing. So that was one of the very first books that I ever read. And so I don't think it was in that book, but it was around the time that I read that book because this was very early in my interest in this subject matter. So
I haven't read the Celestine Prophecy in years, but I'm pretty sure that story's not in there.
Yeah.
It does fill that sort of same role for me because I read it around the same time as you did, of course. This was a long time ago, but it wasn't the first book that I read that sort of got me on this path, but it was for sure one of the first.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's like I said, it's a fictional book, but a lot of the concepts that they talk about, I think, are rooted in, it's a lot of talk of energy and seeing auras and realizing the connectedness of, all things and the connectedness of the different people that come into a lot of synchronicity in that book. And the guy is actually learning how to kind of follow the flow of synchronicity in his life and letting, source essentially lead him to where he needs to go next. And the right person comes along at the right time. And I think that's a big part of what I'm talking about here. It's like once you start setting your intention that way, this kind of thing can happen. Spirit can communicate me through a song, through a moth landing in my hand, through, the right person coming at the right time. And when you start thinking in those terms, the universe reacts because why? It's all a giant mirror. So once you start looking and noticing that it's a mirror and that you actually can affect how to utilize this mirror, that's when you really get empowered. And that's when you start realizing you can, have all the abundance in relationships, monetarily, with your family. I read an interesting account by Brad Pitt recently talking about Angelina Jolie and how here he was, just to sum it up, he was talking about how he was, here he was with one of the most desired women in the world, and she was really struggling, not eating right, very unhealthy. The relationship was in shambles. It was headed down the tube essentially. And all of a sudden he had a realization that, hold on, she's just a reflection of me. She's a mirror of me. And he started just completely changing his focus. Instead of focusing on what was wrong with her and all the things, he ignored them and he focused on all the things that he loved about her. He started bringing her flowers, all these types of things. And she just did a complete 180. Wow. So it's a very powerful example of someone realizing it's a mirror, and that goes for everyone in your life. Try it, guys. Anyone out there listening, the person that you have a lot of struggle with, you bump up against, your mother, your brother, your sister, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, your kids. Try imagining tonight, whenever you hear tonight, whenever you're listening to this, try imagining for 5 minutes, imagining what it would be like if that person showed up differently tomorrow. Focus on all the things you love about them. Give a bunch of energy to that. Drum up the feeling of what it feels like when they're being that. And I think you'll be shocked when you see them show up as that the next time you interact with them. And you start realizing you're controlling your reality with your own energy. So this was the first, this moth story was the first example for me of kind of controlling my external reality in a very tangible way. And, quite honestly, guys, I've tried it many, many times since, the same thing, and it has never worked again. And that's the interesting thing about, having these sorts of experiences. Once you bring in expectation, there's a very fine line between creating your reality, but then you're bringing in expectation. For me, I felt like the universe, wanted to show me, hey, here, you're just opening to these concepts. You're just going down this path. Here's a breadcrumb. Now I'm not going to do this every time. It's not going to happen every time. You're not going to get the creation of it right every time. I'm very much a novice, in this art of manifestation that I believe will become the next great art form on our planet. And
there's one thing about the story that you told about the Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie story and about your personal story. The one big thing that I'm getting is the concept of co-creation. Because when you're talking about, your creation involving another being, of course, that's a big part of what we're all doing here.
Right.
And whether it's a moth, an insect without a lot of what we would consider intelligence, or another human being, especially someone you consider your partner or your equal, it's co-creation in the end anyway. So I think that's part of what sets that element of expectation, like you were saying, and definitely like a little bit of a reflection of the whole, in that this is definitely a co-creative experience on a grand scale. But on the individual scale, you're also sort of co-creating on a one-to-one basis with one other person, one other being, so forth.
Absolutely. So, yeah, like I said, I've tried it many times since and haven't had success. But that particular time that I did have success, it was really impactful. I mean, it was uncanny, it was a long, 20 feet's a long way. It was a far away from me, and it was buzzing in a corner. What would cause it to all of a sudden change direction and fly straight at me and land directly in the middle of my palms that I was holding out for it as a landing pad? It was, it was wild. And I had an experience many years later reading a book by one of my favorite authors and teachers, Dr. Wayne Dyer. And he has a book, I think it's called The Secret of the Power of Intention or something like that. And in that book, he recounts a story of as he's writing the book, this whole thing about monarch butterflies and how amazing they are. They're born somewhere in South America. They migrate all the way up to the U.S. and then find their way home. Or something like that. So his whole point in the book was the magic of here's this thing with a brain the size of, a seed, and it's able to somehow have the intelligence to navigate thousands of miles and back again. And as he's writing about it in his book one day, he lives in Hawaii, I believe, he goes out to take a break from writing, and he has an experience where a monarch butterfly flies up to him, lands on him, and will not leave him for hours. The monarch butterfly is literally on him for like 4 or 5 hours, as he recounts in the book. And he ended up having someone take a picture when he's walking, it lands on him, he continues walking, it won't fly away. He walks home. He sits down. The thing is still on him hours later. He has a picture taken of him with the monarch butterfly on him, and that ends up being the cover photo in the book. And so it was a very similar story. Here this guy is writing all this, very high vibration, positive information. I recommend any of you guys out there listening, if you haven't ever checked out Wayne Dyer, he also does a lot of specials on public television to support public television. So you can catch those for free. And, he's then trying to raise money. So he'll package a bunch of his books or CDs and things.
If you've heard of this podcast but haven't heard of Wayne Dyer, congratulations to you. You're a very unique individual.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. And I loved that story because it was very similar to my own, and here he made it a big part of his book and the cover photo on his book and everything else.
Also involving a butterfly, apparently.
Yeah, not too far removed. So, okay, so that's one story going back really to that's probably my first, positive paranormal event that I ever experienced or can recall. So I have a couple others that I want to share on this podcast. One actually, coincidentally, synchronistically happened tonight. So a few hours ago. So we just had a story that goes back to 1996 or whatever. Here's the 2015 latest. And keep in mind, guys, this one isn't quite as dramatic. This is the type that I see more often, small synchronicities. I believe those small synchronicities, a lot of times they don't have some big significant, meaning. It's, for me, the way I interpret it is you're on the right track. Everything's connected and you're seeing reflections of that connection. And whenever they happen, you get that tinge of, wow, that's cool to see, to connect these dots, this meaningful coincidence. And to give you an example, tonight, me and Dalien are about to begin recording this podcast, and I'm kind of lollygagging, not wanting to, just kind of stalling a little bit and not quite ready to get started. So I start I'm supposed to be, keep in mind, so at this time we're scheduled, because our schedule's pretty tight, we're scheduled to be recording a podcast on my personal, synchronistical stories. So instead of doing that, I'm sitting here in the studio playing online, reading articles. I come across a post on Facebook from a Facebook page, and I believe it's a website as well, Collective Evolution. I follow those guys, some pretty interesting stories and blogs and so forth. And lo and behold, what is the thing, Dalien, that is posted? That's the story of synchronicity. So I open it up, check it out, and it's all about his own personal, the author, his own stories of synchronicity. So I probably need to contact him in regards to being on the show after this. And so I'm sitting there just laughing to myself. Okay, I'm supposed to be recording my stories of synchronicity. Instead, I'm surfing the internet, playing around, stalling, and here I am reading someone else's stories of synchronicity that pop up on my Facebook news feed. So I'm reading that, and it's pretty interesting. He has some interesting stories himself, actually tying into Hawaii. Speaking of Wayne Dyer's story in Hawaii, one of his big stories was every time he goes to Hawaii, meeting someone who becomes important in his life on the plane, sitting next to him like 3 times in a row. And so anyway, like I said, I'll probably reach out to those guys and maybe interview him and have him on the show. That would maybe be appropriate, since now he is built into my own synchronistical story. So that was interesting. Then we decide, okay, let's, I'm kind of, distracted here. Let's go get some dinner, and then we'll come back and start recording. So get up. I finish reading that article. We go to get some dinner. It's me, Dalien, and my son, Bradley. And my son, Bradley, has met my son is 16 years old. So he's getting to the age where he's very interested in girls and starting to date and all that sort of thing, which is very weird for me, by the way, but it's cool too. He's definitely, 16 going on 25 in a lot of ways. So very smart kid. And he's talking to me, sitting there texting some new girl that he just met. And I'm talking a little bit about the synchronicity of reading about synchronicities, an hour or so earlier. And he looks up from being buried in his iPhone and says, "Dad, who's Ram Dass? This new girl I met is talking about reading a book by Ram Dass, and I need to know who that is." And I just laughed to myself, because what happened earlier in the day? I received in the mail a book from who? Ram Dass. Well, Ram Dass didn't send me the book. It was there's a wonderful book called Be Here Now that Ram Dass wrote, and it's a stream of consciousness book. Very cool, written I think 30 or so years ago. But I've owned the book for 10 years, mind you. A friend borrowed it from me a few months ago. He contacted me last week and said, "Hey, that book I borrowed from you, I actually want to give as a birthday present tonight. Can I just mail you a new copy of it and give away yours?" Sure, no problem. So today, a few hours before this dinner, I get a package in the mail, and it's the book by Ram Dass. So, which is of course about opening up to all these sorts of topics. The ultimate nature of reality through the eyes of Ram Dass, and it's a very well-known, famous book that I also recommend checking out. But just so funny, here's another tie-in, another synchronicity, another, I literally just received a book in the mail from that author. So that was a spur of the moment. I didn't plan to include any of that in this podcast, but that just all unfolded this evening. So that gives you an example. And once again, that's not as impactful maybe as the moth, and it's not as impactful as maybe a couple of these other stories I'm about to share with you. But it gives you an idea of the types of experiences that I'm having all the time, and I know more and more people out there are having the same types of experiences.
I'm sure you didn't really plan this tonight, but it's sort of working out this way as well, that you're dropping a few names of what would be considered some of like the forefathers of this whole, spiritual sort of writing genre, Wayne Dyer and now Ram Dass. It's a shame that I really don't read really so much anymore, but I have read, a few things, including some of Be Here Now. And I know
that's a good one, because it's kind of like almost like a coffee table book. There's a lot of illustrations, and It's written in a very unconventional way, where it's drawings with the words written sideways, long ways down the page, and different
it actually
sizes.
appeals to my sensibilities a lot for that reason too.
Very cool, very cool. So anyway, as far as the next story that I plan to include in this podcast, let's see. There was a very big synchronicity or positive paranormal event that happened to me. Let's see. This was going back to around 2006. And it was just a random day. I didn't have much going on that day, and I was listening to some archived recordings on Coast to Coast AM. For those of you who aren't familiar with Coast to Coast AM, it's at one time, I'm not sure if it still is, it's the biggest talk show, radio talk show on the AM dial. It's a national syndicated show, and they talk about all kinds of interesting paranormal events, UFOs, they'll have scientists, lots of cool, interesting topics that obviously would appeal to someone like me. So I'm listening to Coast AM. I am actually listening to an archived recording of someone talking, that particular show. They're talking all about 2012. And if you go back to, this is 2006, there was a lot of talk at that time about 2012 being, the end of the world, or is it the end of the world, or is it, as the Mayans, predicted, or did the Mayans, were they really trying to say, and of course other cultures besides the Mayans, were they really all trying to say that it's the beginning of a new era? And there was all kinds of, conversation and buzz out there, if you guys recall, at that time. And I was very intrigued about it as well. What does 2012 represent? And of course, I, being the eternal optimist that I am, lean very heavily to it not being the end of the earth, and it actually being just the rough time frame that we enter into this new phase of consciousness, expanded awareness on the planet, where everyone starts waking up and remembering their divinity. So anyway, I'm listening to some stuff about 2012. I'm contemplating, as you've heard me reference if you listen to my first podcast, my own delusions of grandeur that day, how I just have this feeling I'm going to play this significant role in helping to wake the planet up and so forth. And I just actually went to Burning Man for the very first time a few months prior, and it was really a life-changing experience for me. That first night, I remember being there, just the energy was just incredible. The creativity and the amount of, conscious people and the amount of love and everything, and it really had a big impact on me. So I'd been thinking a lot about that and the ideas of building, permanent village infrastructure kind of thing. Wouldn't it be amazing to be a part of building permanent village infrastructure, not just for a week, but this is how we should be living all the time, right? And the cool thing about Burning Man Festival is that it's a sharing economy. So you can't buy anything there, well, except ice, but other than that, everyone shares with one another. And that's something that really resonated strongly with me, because I believe our current monetary system, where, you got 40% of the resources controlled by 1% of the people, is completely flawed, especially when people are starving to death unnecessarily every day, when in all actuality, there's plenty of resources to go around. But because of our poorly designed monetary system that incites greed, we let people die every day. I believe our destiny as a species is to move into a resource-based economy, but I won't go into much more about that now. However, I do highly recommend checking out, there's a free online movie. It's called Zeitgeist Moving Forward. There's a few Zeitgeists, but particularly Zeitgeist Moving Forward, if you want to learn more about how screwed up our system is and hear a cool concept for a resource-based economy that could possibly help fix it. So anyway, Kundalini had broken up maybe a year or so before that as well, and I had worked at a small independent record label and, been in a band for many years. So about the time we broke up, I came up with this, what I consider a brainchild idea for a new music distribution platform. I also talk a little bit more about the specifics of that in my first podcast. I won't go into that here for the sake of the story, but so I had this, my brilliant idea of how to, help to redefine the music business and, parlay that into permanent village infrastructure. And I'd come up with this whole master plan. And at the time I was like, okay, I just got to get this out there. I got to put this together. And And, I hadn't really told anyone about it because it was my top secret plan. These days, I don't think quite as conspiracy theorist as I did back then, worried about sharing too much. The only person I'd really told was my brother, maybe one or two other people about, here's my plan for, Industry Music Network. And so I'm sitting there. I finished listening to this thing about 2012. I'm contemplating what that shift will be like and how will I play a part in this great shift and everything. And I come across, just stumbling through the archives, something that mentions a time traveler. And I'm thinking, okay, that's an interesting topic to listen to. Let's pull this up and just see what this is all about, right? And because there's a lot of very, some of it people would consider pretty far out on Coast to Coast, but to me, that's something I've always said jokingly as well. When I grow up, I want to be a time traveler. I mean, what cooler thing could a person do? So when I saw that, I was like, okay, I got to see what this particular one's about. So I pull up this episode, and it's an open call line, which Coast to Coast would have at sometimes, where anyone could call in and ask questions. And this guy calls in, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm calling in because I want to discuss the 2012." The impending 2012 year and what that represents. And I'm actually calling from the future. I'm calling from the year 2063. And of course, I laugh. The George Norrie or Art Bell, I forget which host it was on Coast to Coast that day, but they laugh, of course. It's like, okay. He's like, all right, Mr. Time Traveler, And but the thing was, the guy was not sounding crazy as far as how he talked. He was very well put together, and he was like, well, I'm actually not a time traveler. I'm calling backwards in time, since time, as Einstein proved, time is an illusion. It doesn't exist. I can actually communicate backwards through time, and that's what I'm doing for the purpose of calling into your show right now. And he gives this whole scientific explanation, like, okay.
Oh, yeah, and he was very matter of fact about it.
Yeah,
right. Very calm about it. Exactly.
Absolutely. Very calm and very, well spoken. And so we're like, okay, well, and so then the host says, okay, Mr. Time Traveler, what do you want to talk about? He goes, well, I want to actually talk about 2012. So instantly my ears perk up because I had just been listening to another archived episode all about that topic. And, I had also, keep in mind, been contemplating very heavily that day this plan for industry and, me changing the world and all these, my delusions of grandeur. And so he says, well, there's this, everyone, you're in your time frame, keep in mind, he's in 2063, supposedly. And he's like, everyone in your time frame, most people think it's the end of the world, that 2012 time frame. Well, actually, that's just the beginning of a new cycle, a very positive cycle of, where the planet begins waking up and, all this transformation takes place. And so, the host of the show on Coast to Coast says, okay, cool. That's interesting. I like the sound of that. Well, what triggers this positive change? Because the way it looks right now in 2006, there's a lot of problems, and it looks more like it would be the end of the world rather than the beginning of a new era of enlightenment, right? And he goes, well, one of the main things, and this is the time traveler guy, one of the main things that causes the shift in awareness is there's this musical artist, and he starts a record label, a music company. And of course, now my ears really perking up, right? And he basically understands that, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's been a little while since I've listened to this, might still be in the archives, but he said something to the effect of, he understands that all things are connected and you get what you give. And so he builds this whole music label based around that concept, and it starts having a lot of, success. And from there, him and all his friends start putting their money together and turn this community that's all about sharing turns it into an actual fit from I believe it's something like a virtual community into a physical community. Well, at this point, my jaw's kind of hitting the floor here because I'm thinking, here I have this whole plan that's very much in line. It's all, the industry model is all about sharing the wealth and allowing the fans to make money too. And then I'm very interested in parlaying all the success of it into some sort of a community, a permanent village infrastructure. And, here's this guy calling in saying that he's from the future. And, one of the main things that causes this great, around the 2012 timeframe, this, shift is this new music platform. And that, here I have, this idea. So he says what ends up happening is the thing gets so successful, they turn it into the company into an actual physical community, and they start, they have their own factories, they have their own farms, they, everything. No, there is no money within the community. Everyone contributes as need be, as necessary, and it gets so successful that ultimately they begin sharing resources with people outside of the community. Ultimately, this marks the beginning of our civilization's movement away from a monetary-based economy towards a resource-based economy. Now, that's a pretty profound concept, and I'm thinking to myself, did this guy just suggest that my music distribution platform idea leads to a community that ultimately helps to restructure our entire economy? So at the same time, and I'm of course very open to all this stuff, obviously, but I don't want to be a complete nut job. So I think to myself, okay, if that message, this is like a Friday night, I remember, and I'm thinking, if that message was meant for me and this guy was communicating with me, in some way to encourage me along and, with my plan and I really am going to play this great difference and make this thing happen, I need some kind of a sign. So I literally went into a meditation and said, universe, send me a sign. And the first thing that came to mind was the guy who called into the show. He said his name was Omar. So I said, okay, universe, if that message was meant for me and I'm not just being crazy and reading into something that's not there, send me a sign. I want to see or hear the name Omar within the next, 24 hours. Obviously, I didn't know anyone by that name. It's not a very common name. It's not something that comes up in my world very often. So that was the sign that I asked for. So I go to bed that night. I wake up the next morning. I have something going on, I think, in LA. So I'm driving up. I call my brother who's back east at the time to tell him, man, I heard this crazy radio show. This guy knew my entire idea, basically. He talked about what a success it becomes and the impact, the far-reaching impact that it has. And as I'm driving, I come to a stoplight and I stop. And as I'm telling my brother the story, one of the few people who even know about my master plan with industry, and I look out the window and I'm right in front of a store called Omar's Print Shop. So as I'm telling him the story, it's dead stopped at a stoplight in front of a place called Omar's. I just, this is like Saturday morning at 10 a.m. The whole event had happened Friday night at, 10 p.m. So it was, it was like, for me, it was my confirmation, what I'd asked for, right? So yeah. Fast forward a few years, this is something that is kind of stuck in my head, obviously. And I go back and forth like, okay, Brandon, are you being crazy? Like, but I hear you got this great confirmation. So fast forward a few years, maybe 2008 or so. And I actually had started, had the opportunity to start a real estate related venture with my partner, Jay. And we had maybe 30 employees or so. It had grown pretty quickly. And the idea for me was to get some money together to actually build industry, because industry is a very robust, software or website that I needed some good funding to build this thing properly. And I had very little money. So this venture with Jay didn't take a lot of startup capital. We grew it pretty quickly to maybe 30 or so employees. Things are going a little rocky. I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. We have some success, but we also, there's some struggle as well. And especially with me feeling like I'm supposed to be focused on this industry project. That's what I'm meant to do. Why am I here stuck in an office dealing with, real estate related stuff? And so one day I go down during lunch, and the office we were at had a little kind of zen, running water and plants and everything that you could, a little chill out area. So I went down there and I did a meditation, and I thought, okay, universe, a few years ago, I had this crazy experience with this guy calling in, to coast, and he's talking about my whole idea, and then he talks about how successful it is, and I believe that's what I'm meant to do. I believe I'm meant to do these big things to help, instigate change on the planet. And if I should stop if I'm in the wrong place doing what I'm doing now, if I should stop everything that I'm doing and focus only on industry. And even though I don't really have the resources and so forth, I just need to have faith. If that's what I need to do, then please send me another sign. A couple of years ago, I asked for a sign as confirmation. I asked to see or hear the name Omar. I heard it right away. Let me see or hear that same sign. And if I get that sign, I'm going to quit what I'm doing cold turkey with a real estate company. Not sure how I'll come up with the money and resources to create industry, but I'm going to follow my heart and have faith and do just that. So about a 20, 30-minute meditation. That's at lunchtime on a given, I think it was a Monday. Go to leave work that evening, pick my son up from, after school where he was staying, and we go to drive home, and he gets a call from an old neighbor friend, a kid named Danny. And my son, Bradley, is, hey, Dad, Danny's on the phone. I haven't seen him in, 2 years. Can we hang out today? Please, please, please. And of course, it's a Monday afternoon. I'm sitting in traffic. Danny lives 30 minutes away. I'm like, Brad, no, let's get together on a Saturday or something like that. No, please, please, please. I want to hang out. Okay, fine. So I'm sitting in traffic. I'm driving to go get this kid who's far away. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Stuck in traffic to have a play date on a Monday night, right? We finally get to the kid's house. He runs out. He gets in the car. Literally the first thing out of his mouth, it's like, hey, Bradley, hey, Danny, first thing out of his mouth. Oh my gosh, Bradley, I'm so excited. My dad took me to this bird shop yesterday called Omar's. It was the most awesome bird shop ever. I want a bird from Omar's. Omar's this, Omar's that, Omar's. The kid would not shut up about Omar's. I'm just in the front seat driving like, oh my gosh, this is why I'm here to come get him today.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
It was crazy. Mm-hmm. It was really crazy. I remember even an hour or two later, we're at home and we're having dinner or something. Kid brings up, hey, by the way, did I tell you guys about Omar's yet? And I'm like, yeah, like 20 times. It was intense. It really was. So at that time, actually, I took that sign. I quit what I was doing with the real estate related company with Jay. I tried to scrap together whatever money I could to build industry. I had it built. I go into some detail of that in my first podcast. I had it built. It was, launched in like 2010-ish. And, 2009, 2010, it was being built and launched. And then, or we did a soft launch. We were just testing it and working out the kinks. And that's when all kinds of tragedy hit with my brother's, ex-girlfriend committing suicide. And the little bit of money I had was pulled out from under me. And so, I had to go back to putting it on ice and, ended up launching a new company, which has been, really the biggest success of my life by far. And I've just stepped away from that a few months ago and, launching Positive Head now and then plan to get back to it. So, did it happen? Anything happened on 2012? No. But then again, I think 2012 is, and most people say it's not like a particular day that something was going to happen. That's just like the beginning of a new era, a long, 13,000 year cycle actually. So I guess the verdict's still out on that. It's 2015 now, but I do plan to revisit that project actually in the coming months and year. That's going to become a big part of my priority once I really get the cruise control. I'm used to doing these and everything, and my interviews each week. I'm going to start focusing my attention back to that project. So, although one interesting development that's just transpired in the last couple weeks, I get a call from my partner Jay, who I don't see as much now. He's running our current. I think I referenced in this story, we had a company together in 2007 or so, 2008, and we're partners again on my current company, Resort Share, which I talk about in the first podcast as well. I don't see him as much now because I'm not there day to day running the day-to-day operations as of 4 months or so ago. I've stepped out of that role working day to day. But I get a call from him. He's had a lot of change in his own life, and this is kind of an interesting synchronicity with my plan for industry, I find. And he was kind of joking about it. How ironic it was that he has a new girlfriend just in the last few months. He came out of an 8-year relationship with a girl named Melissa, swore he would never get married, and he meets a new girl named Melissa, says, oh my gosh, this is my soulmate. Her dad, I guess, is a big developer down in Mexico brings my partner Jay in on a development deal that entails 30 miles of coastal property in Mexico. So this is like his future father-in-law brings him in on this deal. He's now 25% owner of 30 miles or so of coastline property in Mexico. And he calls me to kind of tell me this whole thing. And I'm like, he's kind of laughing. He's like, I've been hearing you talk about build this community for, 10 years. And here I just am now part of, her father's project, or his plan is to build an exclusive community, I guess, down there. And where it's self-sustained and so forth, kind of like what I want to do. And, of course, I had to joke with him and say, you need to tell her dad, if you want to make millions, build an exclusive community. But if you want to make history, build an inclusive community. But, no, that's my dream and my plan. So I'm just really happy for him to have such an amazing opportunity. And I do find it to be an interesting synchronicity, as did he, that he's now a part of something developing such a big community project. 30 miles of property is a ridiculous amount. So anyway, we'll see how all that unfolds. But that, guys, is my Omar story. Oh yeah, one disclaimer. For the record, I'm not claiming this guy was definitely calling from the future or anything like that. Of course, I'm open to all possibilities, but the way I look at it is this was simply a message that was meant for me. And whether it was coming to me under the unlikely circumstance of a guy who was actually calling into the show from the future, or whether it was delivered in a much more likely scenario, like perhaps a guy who took some strong acid somewhere in Colorado, who then felt inspired to call into Coast to Coast Radio and blab about an idea that had popped into his head while he was in a heightened psychedelic state. Either way, the same impact was felt on my end. The message I needed to hear to encourage me and spur me on was delivered, regardless of who the heck Omar actually is and what time and place in history he resides. Although it sure would be cool to find out who he actually is one day, and who knows, maybe I will. There was one other story that I really wanted to share that is more recent. And this one happened last year. This happened in 2014. So my girlfriend, my partner, Anna, and I, as I've mentioned a few times, we go to a lot of these transformational music and art festivals. And we had been going to quite a few. Last year in 2014, we probably went to 6 or 7. And we were at one. Well, hold on, let me back up. We were going, when we first started, the season started really around March or so. In 2014. And from the very first one we went to that year, ENS started, and once again, when you're at these festivals, you're really in a heightened state. You've got all these conscious people, all these aware people that are connecting into, to their divinity, waking up to the ultimate nature of reality. So for me, it always feels like I've stepped into another world or something for the time period that I'm there, whether it's a 3-day festival or a week festival, whatever it may be. It's always, got that feel. So here we are. We're at the very first one last year, and Anna this song kind of starts coming to her, and she's just humming the song, and it doesn't have lyrics or anything like this. It's just a melody, but it's very like ancient sounding. It's very beautiful. And I'm like, what is the song? And she's like, I don't know. It's just in my head. And, she just is singing literally the whole weekend, she's singing it at this festival. Well, a month or so later, we go to another festival. Same thing starts happening. She's humming this beautiful, and she, like I said, she's not a singer. She's never been a singer, never really had a huge desire to be a singer, but she's, just got this melody that she can't get out of her head every time we go to a festival. So we end up maybe the 4th one of the year or so. We are at Lightning in a Bottle Festival in Bradley, California. And one evening, this is probably June or so last 2014. And one evening, it's like a Saturday night, lots, pretty big festival, about 15,000 people, lots of music, lots of goings on, people everywhere, having a good time, partying and celebrating. And so you have all kinds of different energy there too. You have some people who are really partying, and you have other people that are all about the music. You have other people that are looking for more like gentle, sacred spaces to reflect and, share stories and connect with people. So we were feeling kind of low key. So we decided we wanted to find somewhere to chill out. So we went, and there's a little section that had a few teepees, and we found this little teepee, and there's maybe 7 or 8 people inside this teepee. So we go in and we're just hanging out and just talking, unwinding really. And it's pretty calm in there. You know, people like drinking tea or something. And so as I'm talking to her, she said, yeah, you know, earlier in the day, now during the day at a lot of these festivals, there is a lot of workshops and things like that. And Anna loves yoga. So she had chosen to go to a yoga workshop, but at the same time, or actually to do yoga for an hour or so. And at that same time that she had done yoga, there had been a workshop on Siberian shamanism that she missed out on. And she was telling me as we're, you know, chilling out in this teepee, she's like, yeah, today I went to yoga and I'm kind of regretting not going to this workshop on Siberian shamanism, you know? And I'm like, oh yeah, we totally should have went to that. Shamanism, fascinating, right? Be a fascinating workshop. And she's also Siberian. Well, her mother is from Siberia, her father is Ukrainian. So, you know, she's a mix of, you know, essentially Russian and Ukrainian. And so I'm like, oh, that was your people. Like, you know, it's Siberian shamanism. You're Siberian. We should have been there, you know, especially you. She's like, yeah, you're right. I kind of regret not going, you know. So we go to leave. We've been hanging out 20 or 30 minutes or so in this teepee. And we go to leave, and this girl is just kind of staring at us, and she goes, guys, I'm really sorry that I've been staring at you this whole time, but you know, there's just something about your energy that is so beautiful, and I'm just so attracted to, and I don't know what it is. I'm so sorry. And of course, we're flattered. Like, that's a really nice thing to say, and we're like, oh, thank you very much. That's really sweet of you, you know, and I tell her, yeah, well, we know that our energy is beautiful. No, kidding. Did not say that. No, it was very flattering. It was very sweet, you know, the way she did this, and it made it put a big smile on her face. Well, thank you. You know, very nice to meet you and everything. And that was it. It was a very short interaction. And we go to leave, and we're outside, and it's kind of chilly. And so there's a little fire outside of this teepee. So we were warming up for, you know, a minute, 30 seconds or so. And all of a sudden from inside the teepee, we hear the singing coming out. Instantly, I'm like, it confuses me because it's the same exact melody, the same song that Anna has been singing for months, and we didn't know what the heck where it was coming from, why she was singing it. Like, we thought it was just some melody that, you know, she made up, right? So she looks at me, her whole expression and energy changes. It's like she's seen a ghost. I'm like, how am I hearing you sing? And actually, you're standing next to me, and here's, you know, she races back into the teepee. The same girl who is, you know, moments earlier were saying, I don't know what it is about you guys. I'm just so attracted to, you know, she's, you know, kind of sitting up on her knees with her arms wide open in like full on trance mode, singing the same song, right? We're just like in awe. Anna's just like in awe. But this girl's not just singing the same melody. She actually starts adding words as well. And this goes on for maybe 3, 4, or 5 minutes. And she starts adding words, you know, to the melody. I am your sister. I am your mother. I am your eternal friend. And I remember at the moment for me, it felt like I was hearing like, I don't know, like she was channeling Mother Earth or something, you know. That's the feeling that came across. So after a few minutes, she snaps out of it. And, you know, she's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what came over me, you know. And Anna's like, you know, oh my God, that's the same melody I've been singing for, you know, months, and I don't know where it came from. She goes, yeah. The other girl's like, I don't know where it came from. You know, I went to this course earlier this afternoon on Siberian shamanism, and we did a ritual to find our twin soul. And, you know, other than that, and we're just like, what? Literally 15 minutes earlier, she's telling me how she regrets not going to this workshop. Here's this girl who, you know, it was wild. The energy in the teepee was just off the charts. The 6 or so other people that were there were, you know, just everyone was just kind of like, what is going on? So that's not all though. Then all of a sudden this guy, one of the guys there, he starts full on convulsing. Like, you'd think he's having seizures. All of a sudden out of nowhere, his eyes roll back. He's, you know, it's kind of scary. Like, you're like, do we need to get help? Like, what's happening with this guy? And all of a sudden, after like a couple minutes of doing it, he just sits up, grabs me by the shoulders. It startled me. Like, I'm like, is this guy about to attack me? Like, and he just starts going into, in the most, you know, confident voice, you know, do not doubt yourself. Do not give up. Do not doubt yourself. You win in the end. You're the, you know, infinite child, the soul of the infinite child. You help save people one by one. Everyone you touch, you are going to make a difference. It's like the story of the kid who's picking up starfish that are covering the beach shore, and he's throwing them in one by one. And an old man comes along and says, "Why are you doing that? You can't save them all. There's way too many." And he goes, "But I can save this one." And he throws them back in. So he goes into the story and he just said over and over and over again, "Do not doubt yourself. You win in the end. Do not doubt yourself." And of course, guys, to be perfectly transparent, that's the biggest issue I've had in my own journey is self-doubt. And I think that's for all of us. I have all these huge ideas and aspirations, and I swing from feeling, uber confident about who I am and what I'm here to do in spite of lots of failures, and, just keep getting up and trying again. And you have those moments of doubt. And so I felt like it was really the message that I needed to hear, and so that was, he went on for a long time. I remember at one point, it definitely seemed like he was channeling someone or something really powerful because of how intense his eyes looked and how confident his voice and his demeanor were. I mean, he actually grabbed the sides of my face, and it felt like he was staring into my soul. I mean, he said something to the effect of, just to be in your presence is such an honor. You play a small role in a giant puzzle that stretches beyond what you can imagine. And then he kissed my forehead and started convulsing again. It was freaking intense, man. And, a little later, the girl who had been singing the song told me at the same moment he grabbed the side of my face, she saw light energy transfer from him to me. Now, I didn't see any of that, but it was definitely one of the most intense experiences of my life. It was a trip. I mean, there was all these, we ended up all talking. He probably went in and out of convulsions with different messages along those lines directed at me for maybe an hour or so. And so then, all of us that are there experiencing this together, there's several other little things that happened. One of the things is we were talking afterwards, and people were like, "Well, what are you trying to do? What do you do for a living? What do you?" And I started telling him about some of my aspirations and, plans to help raise consciousness on this planet. And that, hey, it's kind of an interesting coincidence. He said I'm the soul of the eternal child or whatever, because I'm writing a book right now. Well, at the time I was going to call it 40 is the new 20. Now it's the Fountain of You. It's all about being, remaining youthful forever, right? And so that was an interesting thing, everyone thought. And then I started talking about, actually I just, I was just about to turn 40 at that time. And, so I started asking, well, what, and then I also started telling him some of the other interesting synchronicities and things in my life. Some of these, a couple other stories, and we just all got talking. And I said, yeah, one of the things that I have is, I have a weird thing with my birthday. I was born on my dad was 28 and he had me on July 28th. And that was also his grandmother's birthday. And her mother actually died on July 28th. So it's a really interesting long line there. And then, my business partner and, very close friend, Jay, he has a daughter, and her mother's birthday is July 28th. His grandmother is also July 28th. And my ex-girlfriend has a boyfriend that committed suicide on July 28th. His name was Anson. Well, all my July 28th relatives on my dad's side are from Anson, North Carolina. So it goes on and on. So I was telling him a little that story because that's kind of an interesting one too. And, then as I end that story, I said, by the way, how old are all you guys? I'm just about to, I'm just about to turn 40. Well, as I asked them, everyone in the room, I start with, Anna was the youngest, my girlfriend, she's 22. And then the next person I asked was 23, and then 24, and then 25, and then 26, and then 27, and then 28. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I just tell them my July 28th story, and you're 22 to 28, So we go to leave. That night, we're all in a very heightened state, as you can imagine. We just kind of feel like we've witnessed some magical happenings. And as we're leaving, that's something that Anna points out. She goes, hey, everyone, be very cautious, or not cautious, aware as you're walking home this evening, because, we're all in this very heightened state. Some more magic is liable to happen. So as we're walking home, nothing really profound happens to me and Anna as we're walking. We've all went our separate ways. We're going back to our camp. Their camps, it's a huge festival. Who knows where they're camped at? And but the one girl who she connected with, her her twin soul or whatever, right? She was thinking of what Anna said, and as she walked home, she yelled out to everyone around her, whoever was just walking at that time, on the festival grounds, "Hey, everyone, look at the moon," because the moon was really big and beautiful. And right as she did that, everyone around her looked up, and a huge shooting star went across the moon. Well, as we're walking home, the only thing that happened to us is a guy came running up to us out of nowhere and said, "Oh my gosh, guys, oh my gosh, did you guys just see the big shooting star that went across the moon?" And of course, we figured this out because the next day we were all going to meet again at the same teepee for a workshop that was going to go on there, just so we could reconnect and spend some more time together in the day and get to know each other a little more, because we were really bonded now after this experience. So we go back the next day. And before I go back, I'm wanting to check my, my cell phone, that I could get service in one little area. And I wanted to check in and see how my son was doing and things like that. So I go to this area, I pull up my phone, and my text messages start coming through. And the first text message that comes through is from his tennis coach saying, "Oh my gosh, we just finished the season, and, we won first place," which nobody expected. It was like, we expect them to get like third or fourth in their division. And they we won first place. Now we can wiggle our nose at all those doubters. So, of course, the guy's whole message to me, probably said 50 times the night before, in and out of his, his convulsions, was, "Do not doubt yourself. Do not doubt yourself. Do not doubt yourself." And of course, the other interesting thing I'd pointed out just a couple months before that, the drummer of No Doubt had invested in my company. So that was another little tie-in that I made. So definitely get that message. Do not doubt yourself. So as we're walking to go meet with these guys at the teepee the next day, there's a kid walking in front of us. Me and Anna are walking back, and I see this kid, and he's holding his dad's hand, and he's probably 5 years old, little blonde kid. And it kind of reminded me of me when I was little. I had really blonde hair as a little kid, and I started thinking about what was said to me the night before, being the soul of the eternal child, and everyone that I touch and I transform in some way. Or, I remember him saying, actually, you play a small role in a giant puzzle that has, an impact so far and wide in the grand picture, that you can't fathom, kind of thing. And so I'm contemplating all these things. We're still very excited from what had happened the night before. And all of a sudden, this kid who's walking maybe 30, 40 feet in front of us, we're walking down a flight of stairs, and then it gets to the flat at the bottom. He lets go of his dad's hand. His dad keeps walking. He turns around and sits Indian style at the bottom of the staircase. And I'm thinking, that's weird. I'm sitting here thinking, paying attention to this kid, and he's like, I'm about to walk over him as, he's like blocking the stairs and his dad's not even stopping to get him. So as I walk by him, I just touch, he's at perfect, his forehead is at perfect same height as my hand. So I just kind of touch the center of where his third eye would be, right? I touch him very gently there and keep walking, and never look back. And then as we go and we're sitting down eating lunch, about to go to meet all of our new friends at the workshop, I say to Anna, this is weird because this little boy I was kind of, paying close attention to and thinking about, everything from last night. When I touched his forehead, now I don't know. I feel like some sort of connection to him. Maybe I'm just tripping out because of what happened last night. And so I kind of share that with her, and we go into the workshop, and it's overflowing with people. There's just too many people to even fit inside this little teepee, and they're actually coming out the front, the front entrance of the teepee. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I don't want to sit out here in the hot sun. We can't get in. Let's try and sneak in through the back entrance of the teepee where the instructor is. And so we're actually able to do that. And we sneak in and nestle into this little spot, through the back entrance. And so as we're sitting there, and keep in mind, this festival ground is huge, 15,000 people there. An hour or so earlier, I had this little event with this kid. And all of a sudden, 2 minutes after we get in there, the same back flap that you're not supposed to come in through opens. Who runs in? The same little kid from across the festival grounds runs in and literally comes and sits pretty much on my lap. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here's the kid. Like, I'm like, do you remember seeing me earlier? And he just kind of nods. He's very young. He just kind of like nods. And it was unbelievable. It really was. So that was a string of events that happened at Lightning in a Bottle last year. So those, that's kind of the stories. I mean, I have several others that I could share. We're getting sort of long into this podcast, so I don't know if I'll go into them all, but, that's the ones that I would like to share with you guys.
Mm-hmm. Those are some pretty good ones when the connections get pretty sort of blatant. That's what I like about them, because a lot of times it's just how these things show up that makes them pretty sort of, unbelievable.
Right.
I mean, sometimes you just sort of sit there, like you said, with your mouth hanging open when the coincidence, so to speak, it's just something that, just sort of like gives you a certain feeling.
Right.
It's just obviously
that's a key point. The feeling that comes along with it is just like nothing else.
Yeah. And when it's something that's really just sort of, I've had a lot of these, of course, over the years, but some of them are small.
Most of them, yet, I would say, I've had
really,
very few that are like really dramatic. And every day almost I'll have synchronicities like the story with Ram Dass that I shared. It's like that has become like the norm.
But
in my
exactly.
life.
It's a connection, because the connection feels just very obvious to you. And it's really also, something that shows up in a way that makes it, meaningful, that there is a connection, even though it's just, a coincidence that otherwise wouldn't mean anything to anyone else. So it's just obviously sort of meant for you. So that's the thing that's cool.
And I'm very, and I've said it before, I'm open enough to the idea that I think that's what allows these sorts of things. It's now become part of my story. So the more I'm open to it, if reality is a mirror and a reflection, these sorts of things aren't happening to lots of people because it's not even something that they consider. I'm no better than anyone else. I'm no more tapped in or part of, the God or, the universe or my higher self. I'm just open and looking in that direction. I'm open to that possibility. And, some people would say sometimes maybe, oh, you're stretching or reaching. And hey, I get that. I respect that. But sometimes, some of these stories, and that's why I shared some that are really, really blatant. There's others where, people might say, oh, I don't know, you're reaching, and like I said, I get that.
Right.
And, I don't pretend to have all the answers about the stuff or, what I do feel is when you're having these types of experiences, it's a very clear indicator to that, hey, you're on the right path. Do not, yes, you're thinking way outside the box. You're trying to do big things. You're trying to really make a big difference. Do not doubt yourself. Don't stop. You're going to hit lots of walls. You're going to have lots of doubters. You're going to doubt yourself. Don't, and that's what, so it's very meaningful for me, and it's very, very powerful. And, one of the reasons I want to share these things is because I can't wait to hear listener stories and other people that I'm interviewing stories. And, and if any way that I can contribute, someone hears this and now they're open to the possibility of it happening in their own life. And then as a result, they start having things that really help shift their perspective. I mean, what more gratifying, experience could I have? Because that's really, when you do start waking up to this stuff, you realize the only thing to do is help to inspire and wake others up. Believe in magic. Magic is real. Like life is magic. The fact that you're here is magical. Like, the whole thing is just so fascinating. I think we get lost so often in the mundane day-to-day. We put ourselves in a box and we slowly cut the magic off that we all were born with as children. Everything is magical, and then it slowly, you get conditioned. Don't use your imagination. What? You're taught imagination is a bad thing as a kid almost. And it's like, are you kidding me? That's the most powerful tool you have to create your reality. It's beautiful. So many things are counterintuitive. And I think we're at a point in time in our evolution as a species where it's time to start reassessing some of these perspectives and start all opening collectively to the magic that is, life here on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm, totally. Yeah, exactly. Concerning the synchronicities, I would like to say that I was just thinking how there is for sure an element of, sometimes thinking maybe I am deluding myself, maybe I am deceiving myself, but that also really just sort of plays into the what I think is just sort of the heart of the matter here, how we create our reality. because that's like an understanding that you and I share, but it's really sort of the basis for a lot of the stuff we talk about, if not everything, really. And the point with the synchronicities is that that's just sort of they're meant to show you that there is a connection.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, for example, a long time ago, we talked about this. And my point of view, of course, is that there isn't necessarily so much of a message to them all the time, but there is the ultimate message of showing you there is a connection between what you're thinking and feeling and what you're seeing around you. And that's ultimately meant to empower you and meant to just help you remember that that's the realm where everything comes from, ultimately.
Right.
You know,
And
who you are is that, ultimately.
in that article that I was reading earlier, when I was supposed to be recording my own synchronistical experiences, I was, reading this one, on collective evolution. And he put it well. He was saying, the way he sees it is there's an underlying web that we're all a part of. So, yes, you and I are having, and our listeners, we're all having interdependent experiences, but they're all within, a greater web that's actually where it's all connected. So this stuff kind of pokes through. And of course, the more you're looking at it, the more it pokes through. And the more it pokes through, the more you're looking at it. And it's a domino effect.
Right, yeah.
And that's where I'm at. And that's why I've had
Totally. Now I'm getting like glimpses of how this could play out, over the course of the Positive Head podcast live with, our listeners maybe calling in or sharing stories that tie into the podcast or that,
absolutely.
involve
I think that's something that I've been thinking of that. I'm going to have to, as I get stories from people and then have, guests, maybe I'll have the person I'm interviewing. And then also, okay, we have a listener who's going to call in to share their positive paranormal story. So I can definitely see it evolving into something like that.
Yeah. One thing that I'm just remembering now, Brenny, and I forgot to share with you before, but we have to set up a Twitter account so people can get in touch with us via Twitter submit questions.
All of that. Right. As of the time anyone's hearing this podcast is actually, it's already set up. We just haven't launched. As of the moment of recording right now, we're like a week or so from actually launching the site with all that stuff. So yeah, it's all there. But so we definitely will find a good way to get you guys' stories. And it will be really interesting, Dalien, to hear, stories from people who maybe weren't open to this sort of thing before hearing the Positive Head podcast. And then as a result, it kind of opened them enough where then they had their own experiences. Right. And then they reach out and say, hey guys, here's what happened. Right. That will be fun.
I have a feeling that those are going to make for some of the most interesting stories we'll ever hear.
I think we're going to weave together a tapestry of synchronicity and real magic on this show that in the end is going to shake the foundation of a lot of people's belief. And that's really what I'm here to do and what I want to do. So that's our podcast for tonight. I thank you guys so much for listening with an open mind and heart. And, until next time, remember, as long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Be well, everyone.